Elijah Croft was 37 years old the morning his wife held a garage sale in the driveway of their home in Memphis, Tennessee, priced 17 years of his patience at $200, and handed it to a stranger before he had finished his shift at the rail yard. He found out at 11:43 in the morning. He was eating a sandwich in the break room when his phone buzzed with a notification from the doorbell camera he had installed the previous spring. A woman in a sun visor was handing Diane a folded bill. Diane was smiling. The woman was walking to her car with a wooden display case under her arm. He set down his sandwich. He knew that case. He had built it himself from a piece of white oak his grandfather had milled in 1987. He had kept it in the back of his closet in a box marked with his grandfather's initials, set behind 2 pairs of boots and a stack of old tax records. He had never mentioned the box to Diane. He had never had a reason to. The watch inside that case was a 1963 Patek Philippe reference 1518 in yellow gold, one of 4 known surviving examples in that specific configuration, serviced and documented, with provenance that traced directly to a Geneva auction house and then to his grandfather's locked cabinet, and then, for the last 19 years, to the back of a closet in a house on Faulkner Street that Diane had always called too small. $200. She had priced it at $200. What Diane did not know, what she had never thought to ask in 11 years of marriage, was what Elijah had spent 19 years protecting and why he had never once worn it outside this house. What happened next would cost Diane Croft 40 phone calls she would make from a parking lot. Every one of them unanswered. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning had started the way Saturday started on Faulkner Street. The light came through the bedroom blinds in stripes. The neighbor's lawn mowers started at 8:15. The coffee was already made when Elijah came downstairs because he had set the timer the night before, a habit so old it had become invisible, the kind of small domestic ritual that accumulates without either person in a marriage noticing it has become load-bearing. He poured a cup and stood at the kitchen window and looked at the backyard, at the raised garden bed he had built from cedar planks 2 summers ago, at the Meyer lemon tree in the corner that was just beginning to come back after a late frost, at the fence he had replaced post by post last fall because the old one had started to lean, and he was a man who did not let things lean. He worked as a senior track safety inspector for Memphis Southern Rail, a job that required him to walk 18 miles of line per shift in all weather, reading ballast and tie conditions the way other men read faces. Looking for the deviations so small they were invisible to everyone else, but that, left unaddressed, became the kind of failure that made the news. He had done it for 12 years. He was good at it in the specific way that quiet men were good at things, completely, without ceremony, in a manner that only became visible when something went wrong. His grandfather had told him, sitting on a porch in Clarksdale with a glass of water and the particular stillness of a man who had earned his rest. The things worth keeping, Eli, are the things nobody else knows the value of. That's what makes them yours. Raymond Croft had said this in 1994, and he had been dead for 6 years, and Elijah still heard it on mornings like this one. Light coming through the window, coffee going cool in his hands. He had met Diane at a mutual friend's cookout in Midtown 7 years before they married. She had been laughing at something across the yard, and the laugh had been genuine in a way that made him want to hear it again. They had talked for 3 hours that afternoon about nothing consequential and everything interesting, the way you could only talk to someone you had just met, and she had given him her number on a paper napkin, and he had kept the napkin in his wallet for 2 months before he finally called. She was sharp and social, and she moved through rooms the way people move through rooms when they were used to being the most interesting person in them. He had loved that about her. or had loved the version of it that existed when it was directed at the world and not used as a measuring tool against the space he occupied in it. Things had been different for the last 3 years. He could not name the exact day it had shifted. He knew only that the house on Faulkner Street had begun to feel like a waiting room for something she was planning without him. He put on his boots at 8:40, kissed her cheek, and drove to the rail yard for a half shift that had been added at the last minute due to a track maintenance window near the Shelby County line. He thought nothing of the boxes she had been carrying to the driveway. He had seen them that morning and assumed it was old household goods, the kind of slow domestic purge that came with changing seasons. He had glanced at the boxes the way he glanced at things that did not register as significant. He had not opened them. He had not opened them. He was 5 miles from the yard when his phone buzzed with the doorbell camera notification, and by the time he watched the footage in the break room at 11:43, the woman in the sun visor had been gone for 2 hours. His other phone, the one with the international data plan he had set up 3 years ago through a contact at a private estate services firm in Zurich, was in the bottom drawer of his locker at the rail yard. He had never taken it home. He had never needed to. He went to his locker. He opened it. He looked at the phone for a moment. Then he picked it up and made a call. The woman who answered spoke first in French, and then, hearing his voice, shifted to English. "Mr. Croft, it's been a while. I need a records pull," he said. "Provenance file on the 1518. Full documentation." A pause. "Is there a problem?" He looked at the locker door. "I'll explain when I see you." He did not go back to the break room. He sat in his truck in the rail yard parking lot and did what he always did when he encountered a problem. He started at the beginning. He did not skip steps. He built the picture from the first known point and worked forward. The doorbell footage showed Diane beginning to carry items to the driveway at 9:12 that morning, 12 minutes after he had driven out of frame. The table had been set up in the driveway in a configuration she had clearly planned in advance, signs already printed, pricing stickers already applied, the small wireless card reader she used for her Etsy site account already plugged in. He rewound to 9:12 and watched frame by frame. She had gone back into the house at 9:23. She had come back out at 9:27 carrying the white oak display case in both hands, the way you carried something you believed had been confirmed harmless. He had found that case in the closet on his side of the closet, behind his boots and his tax records, in a box with his grandfather's initials on it in black marker. A box she would have had to reach past his belongings to access. A box that would have required her to open it deliberately and make a decision about what she found inside. He checked the joint bank account from his phone. The Etsy card reader transactions showed 3 sales that morning before 11. The second transaction, at 10:08, was $200 even. She had sold the Patek Philippe reference 1518 to a woman in a sun visor for $200 at 10:08 in the morning. He scrolled his contacts. He found the name of the woman who had introduced him to the estate services contact in Zurich, a Charlotte-based appraiser named Beverly Oakes, who had handled his grandfather's estate documents and who had, at their first meeting, gone completely still when he had opened the white oak case and shown her what was inside. "Elijah," Beverly had said that afternoon 8 years ago. "You understand what you have." "My grandfather told me to hold it," he said. "He said don't sell and don't wear it, and don't tell anyone." She had looked at him over the edge of the case. Raymond Croft was a wise man. He texted Beverly now. "Need to talk. Today if possible." Her response came in 4 minutes, "On my way to you." His hands did not shake. He drove home. Diane was still in the driveway when he pulled up. The sale was winding down. 2 folding tables, a rack of clothes, a box of kitchen items. She looked up when she saw the truck, and her expression arranged itself into something casual. "Hey, done already?" He looked at the tables. He looked at the space where the white oak case had been, which was now occupied by a set of decorative candles she had priced at $5 each. "Where's my grandfather's box?" he said. Her expression shifted by 3 degrees. "The wooden one? Eli, I went through the whole closet. That stuff has been sitting there since we moved in." I figured. What was in it? A pause. An old watch. I Googled the name on the dial and it looked like a vintage piece. I figured maybe 100, maybe 2. The woman gave me $200 for it, and honestly I thought she was being generous. "You Googled the name on the dial?" "Yes. What did Google tell you?" She looked at him. The casualness had not quite held. It said vintage Swiss. It said some models were collectible. I didn't see anything that said. I mean, Eli, it was in a box in the back of the closet. It wasn't in a safe. It wasn't. "It wasn't in a safe," he said. Because I did not believe my wife would go through my belongings and price them. He walked past her into the house. He went to the bedroom. He went to the closet. The box was gone, and the boots were moved, and the tax records had been disturbed, and she had clearly gone through the entire shelf looking for things to add to the sale. He stood in the closet for 30 seconds. He came back downstairs and sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote down what he knew. The buyer. The time. The amount. The camera footage. He opened his laptop and logged into the doorbell camera's cloud archive and downloaded the full morning's footage in 3 clips. He forwarded it to his own email. He forwarded it to Beverly. Then he texted the Zurich contact directly. Full valuation document on the 1518. Current auction estimate. Please send today. He closed the laptop. He put on fresh coffee. He did not speak to Diane, who had come inside and was standing in the kitchen doorway watching him with an expression he recognized as the preliminary stage of an argument she was preparing to win. He turned on the coffee maker and waited. The document from Zurich came in at 3:47 that afternoon, and he read it at the kitchen table while Diane was upstairs. The appraisal was dated 14 months prior, performed by a senior specialist from the Geneva Watch Division of one of the most respected auction houses in the world. The current estimated auction value of the 1963 Patek Philippe Reference 1518, Reference 530 movement, yellow gold case, original dial, documented provenance, was listed as a range. The low end of the range was $3.8 million. The high end was $4.4 million. He read it twice. He folded the document and put it in the interior pocket of his jacket, the one he wore over his rail yard uniform. He called Beverly. "I'm coming to you," she said. "Don't move anything. Don't say anything to her yet. Do you have the buyer's information from the camera footage? Partial plate and a face. That's enough. I know someone." Beverly Oaks had spent 31 years appraising estates for old money families across the Mid-South, and she moved through a situation like this the way a surgeon moved through a familiar procedure. Calm, sequenced, without wasted motion. She arrived at the house on Faulkner Street at 4:30 with a leather portfolio, a recording device she placed openly on the kitchen table without explanation, and a colleague named Thomas Ware, an attorney who specialized in property recovery and marital asset disputes, and who had, in Beverly's words, seen this specific shape of problem before. Diane came downstairs at 4:42 to find 3 people at her kitchen table. Thomas Ware slid a single document across the table. It was a printout of the Zurich appraisal. Beverly let her read it without speaking. The document was 2 pages. Diane read the first page in 30 seconds. She read the second page in considerably longer. Then, she went back to the first page. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Beverly. She looked at Thomas. "Eli," she said, and her voice had changed registers entirely. "I had no idea. I know you didn't," he said. "That's documented too." Thomas walked her through it in the precise language of someone who had no interest in drama and every interest in clarity. The watch was the sole property of Elijah Croft, inherited from Raymond Croft, with provenance documentation predating the marriage by 4 years. Its sale without the owner's knowledge or consent, regardless of the seller's awareness of its value, constituted conversion of property under Tennessee law. The fact that she had accessed a separately stored personal item from a clearly demarcated area of his personal space and sold it for a fraction of 1% of its documented value did not mitigate the liability. It potentially compounded it. The buyer's partial plate, run through Beverly's contact at a private investigative firm by 5:15 that afternoon, resolved to a woman named Carol Messner, 61, retired, address in Germantown. Thomas was drafting the recovery letter before dinner. Diane picked up her phone. He watched her dial. He watched her face as it rang, and then went to voicemail. He watched her dial again. He stood, folded the valuation document back into his pocket, and looked at her. "I'm going to my uncle's," he said. "Beverly has my number." He did not raise his voice. He picked up his keys and his jacket, and he walked out of the house on Faulkner Street for the last time. Carol Messner, to her considerable credit, had not yet sold the watch. She had placed it on her mantelpiece in Germantown and had been researching it online for 3 days when Thomas Ware's recovery letter arrived by certified mail and personal messenger on the same Tuesday morning. She called Thomas's office 40 minutes after opening it and said she would return the item intact and that she had no interest whatsoever in any legal proceeding. She had her daughter drive her to Thomas's office that same afternoon. The watch was returned to Elijah in a padded envelope inside a handled bag. He opened it at his uncle's kitchen table. It was undamaged. He placed it back in the white oak case, which Beverly had retrieved from the Faulkner Street house and brought to him that morning without drama. He sat with it for a moment. Then he put it back in its case and called the Zurich contact. "Now I'm ready to talk," he said. The auction was held 7 months later in New York, and the room understood from the first paddle what it had. The 1963 Patek Philippe reference 1518 in yellow gold, one of 4 surviving examples, Raymond Croft's watch, sold in the final minutes of a sequence that had the room on its feet before the hammer came down. Final price, $4,180,000. Elijah Croft was not in the room. He was on a train to Memphis, watching the Tennessee landscape come back in through the window, thinking about the line he had walked that morning near the Shelby County crossing, where the ballast had shifted 2 degrees, and no one else had seen it. He was done at Memphis Southern Rail at the end of that quarter, by his own choice and on his own schedule. He had an offer from a private infrastructure consulting firm that had been sitting in his second phone's inbox for 8 months, and that he had finally accepted on a Thursday afternoon with the same deliberate quiet with which he accepted most things. Diane had called 40 times on the afternoon of the garage sale. He had counted afterward, reviewing the call log the way he reviewed track records, methodically, without feeling, because the number was the data, and the data was the story. He had not answered any of them. The divorce was finalized in February. Thomas handled it. It was, as Thomas described it to Beverly over coffee afterward, exceptionally clean. Marcus, his oldest friend from the rail yard, told him about Diane in April. She had moved to Germantown, which Elijah found quietly symmetrical. She was working at a real estate firm on the east side of Memphis. She had a new apartment. She had apparently told someone at her gym that she had made a mistake with a watch and had laughed about it. But the laugh according to Marcus, had not quite arrived at its destination. Elijah heard this on a Tuesday afternoon on his uncle's back porch. He nodded. He finished his iced tea. He had purchased a house in Midtown 6 weeks after the sale closed. A 1940s craftsman with original oak floors, and a workshop in the basement, and a yard deep enough to grow things. He had spent 3 months on it himself, evenings and weekends, restoring the window casements and refinishing the floors and rebuilding the fence post by post, because it had begun to lean, and he was still, in all the ways that mattered, a man who did not let things lean. Her name was Josephine. She was a music teacher with a dry sense of humor and a habit of asking follow-up questions, and a way of being still in a room that reminded him of his grandfather, in the specific sense that it felt like capability rather than passivity. They had met at a neighborhood hardware store on a Saturday morning when she had been trying to describe what she needed in plumbing terms she freely admitted were incorrect, and he had been able to translate. She had laughed at that. The laugh had arrived where it was aimed. He was in the workshop on a Thursday evening in October, a year and 3 months after the garage sale on Faulkner Street, working a piece of white oak that he was going to use to build a new shelf for the front hall. The radio was on low. The light in the workshop was good. The coffee in the thermos beside the bench was still warm. He ran his hand along the grain of the oak. He thought about his grandfather. He thought about the way Raymond Croft had always held things, tools, objects, people, with a firmness that was never tight, the grip of a man who knew the difference between holding and gripping, and understood that the things worth keeping did not require force to stay. He was free. He was solvent. He was unbothered. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.